Hey, okay, this is our second video in which I'm going to show you my example of a text-to-text connection. So I'm going to connect an aspect of the podcast serial to something else I have read, okay, to another text. Now, before I show you my example, I need you to watch this little YouTube thing that I made for you about my text, because my text is a Greek myth and you're going to be confused unless you watch this. Now, I would click on it and watch it with you, but then my video becomes a video within a video and then it doesn't upload very well at all. Okay, so if you didn't watch that little video yet of what my myth is that I'm going to connect serial to, please pause me and go in and do that and then come back. Okay, so if you're still here, I assumed you watched the video of the myth. So when I am going to make a text to text connection, first I have to pick a topic that I want to connect to. So I have to start thinking about my original text. Now, my original text is a podcast. It's the first half of Serial about Adnan being accused of murdering his girlfriend. So I have to brainstorm a bunch of issues I see in that text. And so, what I have for you here is a list of things you're going to do in order to be successful at this little project. So, when I'm listening to Serial, these are some of the issues I came up with. Lying, right? There's lying in Cyrano. I'm sorry, not Cyrano, in Serial. There's confusion. There's tenacity. Tenacity means you don't give up, and our journalist doesn't give up. There's high school drama. There's bodies and trunks of cars. There's friends versus acquaintances and what that feels like. There's alibis. There's a whole podcast episode about cell phones. There's miscommunication. There's the police maybe not investigating something thoroughly. There's teenagers who write dark poetry. And there's a lot more. Okay, so you're probably going to come up with extra that you could write in here. All right. So I have to look at my brainstorming list and be like, what else have I read that has one of these things that I could talk about? So I have to think of things I've already read because I don't want to make this harder than it really is. I want to use something I've already read. Okay. Now, the other thing I really like is I like art. So I see this like confusion, right? In Serial, there's a lot of confusion. Like who was where, when, what's going on. I like art. And Scott Hutter and Picasso both have art that demonstrates mass confusion. Okay, so I might look up like a Pablo Picasso painting and during his cubist period when he painted faces, like the face parts were all over the place and it's just like mass confusion, and I might connect that idea of confusion in his paintings to a confusion in the podcast. Okay, or see, I don't want to talk about confusion. Confusion is just one thing I could connect to. Maybe I'm really like attached to this idea in Serial of miscommunication. So maybe I want to find a story or a poem that has this idea of miscommunication in it. I feel like we read a play in which there was a lot of miscommunication going on. Or I could look at things I've already read this year, right? We've read of Mice and Men. My kids have read Guardian. Mrs. Thurber's kid, Miss Thurber or Miss Wolf's kids have read To Kill a Mockingbird. We've read Cyrano. Do these texts connect to Serial, the podcast, in some way? Can I connect like a character in one of these or a circumstance in one of these to Serial? Okay. Unfortunately, there's also probably a news article about a body in a park or a car that I could find, but I have to be careful because I can't make a simple connection. Okay, it's got to be more than just like, oh, this text has a dead body and this text has a dead body. That's only a partial connection. All right, so I have decided what I want to focus on, like what's going on in this podcast, a theme that I want to talk about. I'm going to pick my second text. And in doing my second text, I could look at databases. I could look for poetry on the web. I could look through books I've already have. And then I want to narrow it down. And I'm going to come up with an idea. So my idea is this. This is my idea, you guys. And actually, I think I spelled this guy's name wrong. I'm going to fix it. Sisyphus, okay? Sisyphus he's part of a Greek myth, and you've just watched that video, so you know who Sisyphus is. He is the guy who is stuck pushing a rock up a hill for eternity because he's being punished for being a terrible person. So I'm going to connect Sisyphus to Sarah, our journalist. I'm going to say this guy pushing this rock up this hill is a lot like Sarah. And I'm going to explain why. We're going to get to my example. So the fifth step I'm going to do is I'm going to find my text and I'm going to include it, because when I'm reading your text to text connection, I also need to read part of your other text. So include the link to the second text that you find. Again, your first text is Serial, the podcast, and you're connecting it to a second text, which is a poem, a song, a movie, a short story, a piece of art. So here's an image to help you just picture Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill. Right here is my text to text connection. It is color coded because you know I love my colors. So I'm going to include the link. I'm going to include my name. I'm going to have an introductory sentence in purple. I'm going to have my thesis. I'm going to underline it. I'm going to have two quotes. Okay, from my text. I'm going to have transitions. I am going to have two connections. I have to connect Sarah to Sisyphus in two ways. I'm going to have commentary and reasoning. I am going to have a concluding statement. I'm going to proofread it, and I'm going to hit submit into Google Classroom. So let's look at mine. I start with my intro, okay? A sentence that's going to get our attention. Comparing a king of Corinth from the beginning of time to a journalist from the 21st century seems absurd, like comparing a giant to a mouse or a mountain to a valley. Yet perhaps this comparison is not as absurd as the lack of evidence used to convict Adnan Syed. In fact, Sisyphus and Sarah share some similarities. Sisyphus, a brutal king, continually made the gods, especially Zeus, angry. One of Sisyphus's biggest violations was his disrespect of the Greek belief in hospitality. Now, this is in red. It's a quote from my text. He violated the Xena, the concept of hospitality and generosity shown to travelers and guests, by killing them, so he could prove he was a ruthless king. Obviously, Sarah Koenig, the journalist and narrator of Serial, is not like Sisyphus in this way. In fact, she goes to great lengths to make the strangers she interviews feel comfortable. So I'm acknowledging they're not exactly the same. In fact, however, because Sisyphus, so here's a transition, put that in blue, was so terrible during life, he was extremely punished in the underworld. The myth states, Zeus, fed up with Sisyphus's tricks and cunning, punished him to eternally push a boulder uphill. However, as soon as he would reach the top of the hill, the boulder would roll off and Sisyphus had to push it back again. His punishment was that he would push a rock up a hill for eternity. The rock would then roll down and he would have to push it up again. Sometimes this myth is used to symbolize the idea of moving ahead, only to have something happen that diminishes your progress. Sisyphus was constantly moving ahead or up the hill, but then gravity would pull the rock he had just moved back down. So he's always moving this rock up the hill. It gets to the top and it rolls back down. And I'm going to compare that idea to Sarah. This reminds me of, I have my sentence stem here, moving into Sarah. Sarah's progress in attempting to determine if Adnan is innocent. She's able to push the rock up the hill by pointing out flaws in Jay's story. But then in episode 6, the Nisha call makes Adnan look suspicious. Therefore, the work she has done in unraveling Jay's story is diminished. Just like Sisyphus's work pushing the rock uphill is diminished. So their work is sort of undone every time. Sarah thinks she's going to get a break in the case, and then she doesn't. Sisyphus thinks he's got the rock up the hill, and then he doesn't. It rolls back down. There's a second reason I connect Sarah to Sisyphus, because I have to have two connections in my paragraph. While it is true that usually this myth is used to show the idea that we just can't get ahead, some wonder if perhaps Sisyphus was smiling while he pushed that rock. Perhaps it was his chance to work against gravity or to demonstrate his work ethic and tenacity. Even if this interpretation is flawed, we can agree on one thing. Both Sisyphus and Sarah continue to attempt to defy gravity. Both take on hard tasks, tasks at which they will most likely fail. Sisyphus is never going to get that rock over the hill because he is working against gravity and destined to punishment. And Sarah is most likely not going to be able to prove Adnan innocent because she is working against a criminal justice system that seems uninterested in exploring all the details of the case. Okay, so I have my two connections. Okay, their work keeps getting undone, and they are both sort of like working against things that work against them. Okay, Sisyphus is working against gravity. Sarah is working against a justice system that did not investigate. Then I have my concluding sentence. Thus, this cruel king and this impressive journalist do indeed share similarities when we look below the surface. Okay, so this looks like a lot, but once you do this, like the second thing here, you guys, the second step where you think of what you've read or a movie you've seen or a poem you can find, and you pick one of these things. Now, again, you don't have to pick one of the ones I came up with. I purposely didn't brainstorm everything that's in the text. And then you make two connections in a paragraph. If you have any questions this week, please set up a Google Meet time with me. In fact, I might just set up some things like that anyway. Keep checking Google Classroom. And this week we are also listening to episode 8 or 7 and 8. Okay, so you should be in my Google Classroom every day getting something done. Okay, here's your checklist. Here's my example of the text to text, which is due in a week. Got it? All right. Again, email me with questions or concerns.